Biden had something to say about China during this interview, as he seems to always have something to say about China during every time he is, I guess, forced to speak to the media. So let's get this. Yeah, let's try to finish this up in the next 15 minutes just to show you what he had to say. What did he say? It's disastrous. He does this every time. I think this is his fifth time saying this. Biden tells 60 Minutes U.S. troops would defend Taiwan, but White House says this is not official U.S. policy. So this is how deranged Joe Biden is and the imperialist system is right now. There's all sorts of divisions, and it's not a divisions on the agenda or the interests or the ultimate goal. This is the goal. This is the goal. Don't let these forces tell you otherwise. All right. This is the. Don't let them try to bamboozle you. Everything that the United States has done in the last even just 6 years alone, right? We had John Pilger on here, the coming war on China. You heard it from him. Just in this period alone, right? In that short period, less than a decade, you know where this has gone. Okay, it has gone. This escalation towards China has gone to just monumental uh, places. It is high. It is just the escalation is just so grand, right? The aggression toward China. It's an aggression that spans so many different arenas. It's a new Cold War. It's economic. It's political. It's military. The U.S. military is literally all in against China. So much militarization of the Asia Pacific that it will make your head spin with the military bases in the hundreds of personnel in the hundreds of thousands, 60% of the Navy, 50% of the military. The Indo-Pacific Command is basically half of everything that the military does at this point. We're talking about full spectrum dominance, and China is the number one target of that. The Russia-Ukraine special military operation, I mean, that has definitely brought the militarization and the escalations and encirclement of Russia to a particular climax point. But with China, it's been this constant, consistent aggression that has not reached that point yet, because the United States has really one flashpoint. As of course, it's militarizing the whole region, but only one flashpoint that it can't seem to get right when it comes to Taiwan. It has not succeeded here, but this is what this is about. It's about Taiwan, because the United States sees an opportunity here to try to facilitate its policy of balkanization and division against China, similar to what it's doing toward Russia, but it's not going to work. And the reason why it's not going to work is because of this kind of division, this public division. There is a face that must be saved here because of the consequences that a war on China would bring to the United States. So it can't all be that the United States can do what it's doing to Russia right now. That's just impossible with China. It can't even attempt that. And because it attempted it against Russia and has largely failed to do so against China, which the Biden administration was mulling and ended up settling for a lesser version of economic sanctions on China, it would be, I mean, I said it on this show, it would be such a disaster. We can't even fathom how much of a disaster it would be. So this interview happened on Thursday with 60 Minutes, as I said. So this was about 4 days ago. Putin, no. This was so this is Pelly, I think. No, this is, sorry, I'm getting confused. So in the article, it's just opening up with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting, because Putin met with Xi Jinping. And so Scott Pelley asked Biden about this, about Taiwan, right? He said, concern about Russia's war. This is what they always say. If Russia can do a special military operation against Ukraine, then China can do one against Taiwan. But of course, it's different, and they don't want to talk about it. This is corporate media slander and propaganda. But here we go. Pelley says, what should Chinese President Xi know about your commitment to Taiwan? And Biden said, we agree with what we signed onto a long time ago, said Biden, in that there's a one China policy. Taiwan makes their own judgments about their independence. We are not moving or encouraging independence. We're not. That's their decision. But would you use U.S. forces to defend the island? Pele asked, yes. In fact, if there was an unprecedented attack, Mr. Biden said. So unlike Ukraine, to be clear, sir, said Pele, U.S. forces, men and women, would defend Taiwan in the event of a Chinese invasion. Yes, the Biden said. So after the interview, a White House official said U.S. policy, a White House official, probably the CIA, U.S. policy has not changed. Officially, U.S. maintains strategic ambiguity on whether American forces would defend Taiwan, but the Taiwan Relations Act obligates the U.S. to equip Taiwan to defend itself. And that's what happened earlier this month when the State Department announced $1.1 billion more in a sale of military equipment to the island. So that's basically the deal. Joe Biden once again, right? And I'm just gonna end the article. He did it again. And this has happened 4 or 5 times now since he has been president of the United States. It's only been 2 years, less than 2 years. We have Joe Biden saying a handful of times that the United States would be willing to go to war under the right circumstances. Those circumstances being this Chinese invasion of Taiwan, its own sovereign territory, one that the United States recognizes. There's the strategic ambiguity is really a strategic hypocrisy because the Taiwan Relations Act is a hypocritical policy. It's a policy that says, okay, the one China policy through the joint communiques, through the UN resolution 2758, sure, those exist, but they are not necessarily things that we need to they're not necessarily things that we need to abide by in full. We can, without directly waging war against China on behalf of Taiwan, we can militarize Taiwan, and that is not deemed to be a violation of the one China policy. It's a completely hypocritical, absolutely ridiculous assertion. The foreign ministry in China, Wang Yi, it's in its entirety rejects this premise because the joint communique, the third that was signed in the 80s, literally says that these arms sales are supposed to go down. They're supposed to eventually hit zero. They're not supposed to go on forever. But here we are. Strategic ambiguity means that the United States can militarize Taiwan, can interfere in its political affairs, can try to organize Taiwan against China, foment and support separatism and so-called independent sentiment. And somehow that's not a violation of the one China policy. And then you can have the president over and over and over and over again said, well, in the right circumstances, we would invade Taiwan in order to fight China. So, I mean, this is how absolutely belligerent, suicidal, how callous, and just absolutely filled with hubris and parasitic. And we can go on and on about the qualities of the American empire. But this is all to say that the American empire is really thirsty for a war with China. And they are literally telling us that there are circumstances where one could come about. And so some people might say, well, that's not a terrible thing. Of course the U.S. should go to war if it's a just war. When has there ever been a just U.S. war? Never. There's never been a just U.S. war. The United States does not wage wars for justice or humanitarianism or human rights or whatever. The U.S. wages wars for capital. It wages wars for domination. It wages wars for hegemony. It wages wars for itself, for its own interests, for the interests of those that it serves, which is the capitalist class. And so there's never been a just U.S. war in its entire history. Never. Not World War II either, because the United States leveraged that for its own profiteering and its own interests for world domination and global leadership. It wasn't about democracy, quote unquote, in World War II either. It was a myth of it's a good war myth. It's always been a myth. And so there are no circumstances that we should accept this. Even if China were to try to take Taiwan by force, in the sense that Taiwan goes independent, declares independence, and China says, no, absolutely not, and actually completes what is a logical conclusion of the military operation that it conducted surrounding Taiwan right after Pelosi's visit. If it were to do that, even then the United States would have no right, because there are international mechanisms for this. Is Taiwan a nation? Can it bring up its grievances at the United Nations? I would say no, it cannot. That it would be an affair that is squarely within China's sovereign territory. And so, of course, right, there have been these issues within countries where the US and Western countries have used the UN to punish a country like China. That may happen, but there are still avenues and channels the United States and really the rest of the world, including the imperialists, are supposed to go through before they wage a war of aggression. It's not just about the circumstances in their own judgment. But this is how the United States bastardizes, completely tramples upon international law, the UN conventions, the norms, all of it. It tramples upon all of it. And that is I think the lesson here is that there are circumstances that the United States would go to war with China, and it should be very, very concerning, and we should oppose it without question. There shouldn't be any wavering. I don't want to hear about, oh, but what about Taiwan, and what about what it wants? What about Taiwan? Taiwan is not recognized as an independent country. Taiwan is within China's jurisdiction. Taiwan has a lot of autonomy. Taiwan has a lot of separatist sentiment spreading around, a lot of political interference from the United States. But even still, the desire to keep the status quo is really, really high. And so I don't want to hear about that. Oh, what does Taiwan want? What do the Taiwanese want? I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear what Tsai Ing-wen wants. I want to hear what international law says, the norms that we're supposed to be governed by. I want to know what those have to say. And I want us to follow that. I don't care about, this like moralistic attempt to shove hypocrisy down my throat when the real threat is a war. The real threat is a US-led aggressive war against China, which would be disastrous for humanity and would place us on the brink of nuclear winter, just like what the United States is doing with Russia right now. So I don't want to see that, and I'm 100% opposed to that, and we all should be too. And that's, I think, the lesson of this story. The lesson is that Biden is a war criminal himself, even just by uttering that. But we know he already is one, trying to call Putin a war criminal while he's saber rattling and escalating with Russia and China every second of the day.